Hi, I'm Belinda Fettke, and my topic is nutrition science. How did we get here? Who decided we should eat plant-based dietary guidelines to eat for health? And why? How did we get to a place where the Australian government recommends basing 2/3 of our diet on plants, including highly processed grains, seeds, legumes, and soy? A high-carbohydrate, low-fat diet that not only includes industrial seed oils, but it allows the food industry to place discretionary foods on our so-called Guide to Healthy Eating, putting the onus back onto individuals for energy balance. As Gary points out, you need to send out a search and rescue party to find the red meat and full-fat dairy, but at least they are still there. The US MyPlate can't even bring itself to mention the word meat. Instead, it references protein broadly to include legumes, fake meats, and soy products, pushing even higher carb, low-fat dietary recommendations, regardless of health. So where did the meat go? When did the current nutrition doctrine, which espouses cereals, grains, and vegetable protein, come to be accepted as the gospel truth? And more importantly, why? Time for a quick history lesson, but first let's consider the US government's guide to good nutrition in the 1940s, a time before the widespread adoption of highly processed, fortified cereals, plant milks, and meat substitutes crept into our diet and into our vocabulary. John Harvey Kellogg was one of the most influential promoters of a vegan diet in Western medical history. In 1883, he and his wife set up an experimental kitchen at the Battle Creek Sanitarium. According to Kellogg's notebooks, there were a lot of failed experiments over the years. By 1882, he had perfected and was commercially selling gluten wafers and gluten foods for diabetics. In 1894, he invented the process to flake wheat, and a few years later, flaked corn, paving the way for the most famous breakfast cereal of all time, Kellogg's cornflakes. But cereal wasn't the only thing John Harvey Kellogg invented. He invented nut meat analogues as protein alternatives to meat and dairy to serve to patients at the Battle Creek Sanitarium. In 1896, his invention, Nuttos, became the very first commercial meat alternative produced in the Western world. It was made primarily from peanuts, which, by the way, aren't really nuts. Peanuts are actually legumes, like soybean. In 1901, he patented a vegetable substitute for meat, which he called Protos. He was a huge advocate of soybeans, inventing soy meal, soy milk, powdered soy milk, and a soy acidophilus cheese in 1937. A little bit earlier, he presented a paper, Soybeans as Human Food, to the American Soybean Association. Over his lifetime, John Harvey Kellogg held more than 30 patents for food products and processes. Why was he so intent on inventing and producing vegan food? It's because John Harvey Kellogg was a temperance health reformer of the 1800s, but his views on temperance went beyond the moderation or abstinence of alcohol. He believed that all stimulants were harmful, not only alcohol, but tobacco, caffeine, spices, and meat. He believed flesh eaters developed animal propensities and stirring of baser passions, leading to the most heinous sin known to man at that time, self-vice. But where did these temperance health reform ideas stem from? John Harvey Kellogg was a devout Seventh-day Adventist. His father had helped settle the fledgling remnant church into Battle Creek, Michigan in 1863, providing large sums of money to help set up their printing press, and he was also a major shareholder in the Western Health Reform Institute, a sanitarium found on the health reform principles advocated by the Adventist Church under the guidance of the Spirit of Prophecy, the term that came to be applied to the visions and writings of church co-founder Ellen G. White. who was just 17 when she experienced the first of over 2,000 visions and dreams from God. These visions were to help her morally and spiritually guide God's chosen people on the importance of commandment keeping and healthful living. The health reform vision given to her in 1863 led to her pronouncement that the diet given to Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, fruits, nuts, and seeds, constitute the diet chosen for us by our Creator. Ruben Sanchez Sabat was a co-author on the paper called Feeding Holy Bodies, and he suggested plant-based diets aren't necessarily about health as an end in themselves. They are just as much a means of feeding and nourishing an identity. In creating a new identity, Ellen G. White gave the Seventh-day Adventist Church its legitimacy, because a new religion requires new scriptures. Otherwise, how do you differentiate it from anything else? So not only does the plant-based Garden of Eden diet give Adventists a sense of identity and belonging, it offers purification of the body, morality, and spiritual perception while suppressing animal passions and desires. It allows Adventists to demonstrate their faith in God by signifying to one another and to the wider society their degree of commitment to the Adventist message. In this way, food and nutrition become a medium to communicate values and ideas, a tool to open doors to evangelize, and a way to take the gospel to the people. Ellen G. White made healthful living a religious obligation. From the Church's founding in 1863, she warned of the physical dangers of meat eating and violating the laws of nature, authored by God Himself. She was told by God that medical evangelism was to be the right arm of the Church, and every single member was to continue the healing ministry of Christ, to prepare people for the second coming and eternal salvation. Ellen G. White wrote, "The health reform message was to be the great entering wedge, whereby the diseased soul may be reached. This will find access to hearts and minds and will be the means of converting many to the truth." You may be interested to know that the Seventh-day Adventist Church now has more than 21 million members. It's the second biggest educator worldwide behind the Catholic Church, with nearly 2 million students enrolled in primary, secondary, and tertiary studies. They're considered a global health provider with 211 hospitals, 28 in Florida alone. And they have attended over 22 million people through outpatient departments around the world, with nearly every one of them supported by Adventist health food industries, of which the Adventist Church acknowledge owning 22, producing almost 2,500 meat and dairy substitutes and breakfast cereals. In Australia and New Zealand, Sanitarium and its Life Health Foods arm have charity status under the church umbrella, and as such they pay no tax. Ellen G. White was a prolific writer and wrote over 5,000 periodical articles and 49 books in her lifetime. She is the fourth most translated author in the history of literature and the most translated American author of either gender. Without understanding the elevation of Ellen G. White's extensive writings as divinely inspired interpretations of the Scriptures, it's impossible to comprehend the implications of the Adventist Church's anti-meat messaging in today's society. John Harvey Kellogg was just 12 years old when he went to work for the first family of the Adventist Church. He was given the task of typesetting Ellen G. White's book, A Solemn Appeal to Mothers, which spoke only of the responsibility of mothers deterring their children from masturbation. Her written word was delivered through the powerful art of sermon, instilling guilt and fear into her readers. I've been shown that children who practice self-indulgence previous to puberty or during the period of merging into manhood or womanhood must pay the penalty of nature's violated laws. Such are just as surely self-murderers as though they pointed a pistol to their own breast and destroyed their life instantly, she wrote. Imagine being a 12-year-old and typesetting those words. Is it any wonder that when he became a doctor, John Harvey Kellogg tried everything to prevent intemperance and sinful masturbation? To avoid stimulants, he invented bland breakfast cereals, plant milks, nut and soy meat analogues, and he prescribed vegan diets. His inventions were marketed as health foods, but they were essentially to curb sexual desires. I'm not opposed to those who choose to be vegetarian or vegan for cultural reasons, health concerns, ethical beliefs, nor for religious ideology. My concern is that choice is being taken away from you and I by those creating and protecting the rulebooks. Taken away from people who choose to follow low-carbohydrate, healthy fat principles that include animal proteins and fats in their diet. I try to stay respectful, but I can't stay silent.